Welcome to This Week of Common Sense, starring Paul Jacob. My name is Timothy Verkula. This is the podcast for the last full week of November 2020. We have a podcast to do. And you had 5 pieces this week. We didn't punt for Thanksgiving Day.
We didn't do any cheating on Thanksgiving, and of course, it is nice when you're doing a daily thing. It's always nice that there's a day you can, put up a graphic or something. And Thanksgiving's perfect, but we had I thought something to say on Thanksgiving, and it was a easy story to relate, and always a good story to keep people aware of. That there are some really sad situations in this world. And maybe that's where we start. The saddest Thanksgiving.
But that was the day before Thanksgiving.
That was the day before Thanksgiving. That's right. That's a different story. The Thanksgiving was Thank You, Anonymous Leaper.
Right, which was a more fun story.
Yes, not a down story. And we'll get to the down story maybe next. But Thank You, Anonymous Leaper is about the North Korean gymnast. Thank goodness he was a gymnast, because he managed to find a way to literally leap over a very high fence, barbed wire fence, to freedom. And all over this world, there are varying degrees of freedom, but there are still an awful lot of places and an awful lot of people who live in basic totalitarianism. And probably no more obviously totalitarian place in this world than North Korea. And thank goodness, at least Trump will be able to get through his term not having given them any free oil. I remember when, I believe it was the Clinton administration, that Clinton had some deal with them where he was sending them, free oil, because of course their totalitarian, completely repressive country is, gee whiz, not very economically dynamic. And they were starving and didn't have any fuel and so on and so on. And Clinton did a deal with them, they were going to do some things and we'd give them free oil, and they got the free oil. And that was pretty much it. And so, I think the whole time the deal with North Korea and with Trump has been, pretty iffy. But I've never really been too worried about it. And, sometimes you worry Trump or any president, doing something that's going to be problematic. With North Korea, it's not like you're going to make them crazy. They're already crazy. And so anyway, nice to see someone escape what's happening in North Korea. And of course, over the border of North Korea is a totalitarian country that has it much better economically. China has certainly lifted living standards, has pulled a lot of people out of poverty. Not so many people starve as used to starve in China. Of course, they were starving under Mao and under a communist system. And basically, that communist system has become a capitalist system in this sense, not in the free market sense of capitalism, but in the sense of capitalism as go make money, go create capital. And China has, it's why they have horrible environmental records, because they don't have to take care of the environment unless the government tells them to, and the government tells them to go make money and don't worry so much about the environment. And of course, the same was true in the Soviet Union. I remember right after it became Russia, I actually took a trip to Russia in 1993. And I remember flying home, and boy, it's always nice to fly home from there. I remember I sat next to a guy who had been out in Siberia in the oil fields, and he was telling me it's almost as if they go out of their way to be sloppy and to leave messes. And he said they would just create, just throwing everything all over and not a care in the world about the environment. And then they move down the road and do it again. And that has been the record of the more, we need government somehow. We're constantly told to keep the environment safe from these capitalist exploiters. But in the places where they get rid of the so-called capitalist exploiters are the places that the environment is completely desecrated. And when you think about it, well, where is the environment most protected? It's places where individual human beings can go to court and say, your pollution violated my rights and you have to stop it. And in a country like China, where the government has all power, there's no democratic check on that power. You could go to the government and say, you have to stop it. The government's saying, no, we want the money from that economic activity. And so it's, and when you think of North Korea, I don't know what the population right off the bat of North Korea is. But I can tell you the population of China is somewhere between 1.4 and 1.5 billion people. And that's an awful lot of people living under totalitarianism. And, other, oppressive authoritarian regimes around the world. But think of a country like India, which has a functioning democracy to some extent, has a tremendous amount of religious and ethnic strife. But India has a copy of the Hong Kong national security law, very similar. If you live in India and you say this government is horrible and terrible, you can be brought up on charges. And it's why on this podcast and at thisiscommonsense.org, we constantly talk about freedom of speech, and that freedom of speech is America's gift to the world. It was the first place that just codified that you can say anything you want, and the one group of people who cannot do anything about it is the Congress of the United States. Congress shall make no law. That's how the First Amendment begins. So when it comes to your religious freedom, your ability to speak, your ability to get together, Congress can make no law that blocks that. And of course, the 14th Amendment has spread the Bill of Rights basically to the states too. So the state governments can't make any law on that basis. Now, when you think about that, they're making all kinds of mandates right now about what you can do, not so much what you can say, although they've got Silicon Valley and the high tech companies to regulate our speech, privately. But in terms of all of these lockdowns and mandates, what gives, especially when it's not even legislated, oftentimes it is the governor or the mayor just telling people what they have to do and putting people out of business. And of course they can refuse to do it. And I think ultimately a court would probably uphold that they were right, that the governor didn't have any power to mandate that they shut down their business or wear a mask or whatever particular thing it is. And as we've continually said, let people be free. You can mandate it. Some people are still not going to do it. But if you would ask people to do what you think is the right thing as a government elected official, you would find a lot more resonance to what you're saying, a lot more people listening, considering it. People are going to do what they want to do for the most part. And as a lot of different mandates go into effect and lockdowns, police have been clear in a lot of places in the country, we're not going to be arresting people for having more than 10 people at Thanksgiving dinner, for, if someone didn't wear a mask somewhere and bumped into somebody on a city street, the police are not doing a manhunt to go find that person. And so, thankfully, Sheriff Andy Taylor lives in a lot of police forces around the country with just a little bit of common sense. But anyway, that we've gone far afield. But on Thanksgiving, we just said thanks to someone who took a leap of faith, got over a 9-foot wall with barbed wire, and is free and not subject to the North Korean totalitarianism. And he was smart. It's funny he didn't jump the fence to go to China. He jumped the fence to go to South Korea. I'll bet that wasn't an accident.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's not an accident. And nicely, to go back to the mandates in the United States, there are quite a few courts now are striking down governors' edicts.
That's
Cuomo,
right.
Cuomo just got a big no.
That is great. Sometimes you worry in an emergency that the courts are so deferential, but they've been very good on that. And of course, the Michigan Supreme Court, Whitmer, has created so much controversy, and polls. Some of the polls have shown that it's popular, some of her different mandates, but the Supreme Court there shut down and said you don't have any of these powers. And then, of course, the problem was her attorney general was saying she's going to continue to enforce those mandates that the court said she could not. Now, that's a level of lawlessness that's just beyond the pale. And of course, at thisiscommonsense.org, I don't remember the title of the script, but we have a search function, and we talked about the fact that this can be rectified. Michigan has a recall process, and they have begun a recall effort in Michigan on the attorney general. And thank goodness.
And there's also talk of impeachment as well.
They are talking about impeachment of the government.
But I'm not sure how they can do it with the political situation they're in, right? Is that
well? The
possible?
Republicans have a majority in that legislature. They could, and I don't know what the vote thresholds are, so it's quite possible that they could impeach her. They're not going to, because the effort to impeach, which we haven't discussed at thisiscommonsense.org, but if you Google it, you'll find there are some folks who've said we're going to file something on impeachment. Maybe they've already filed it, but leadership had pretty much said we're not letting this go anywhere. So the Republican leadership has decided, I'm sure for political reasons, like every other decision is made, that they're not going to go after Whitmer. I think they think somewhat in the same way that, the impeachment and all these different things that the Democrats did to get Trump is not what got Trump, I think. I think that coronavirus and the fears built up on that was the driving thing in the election on a lot of the subsidiary issues. The economy, I think people thought Trump would be better. A lot of foreign policy, China, which was a big issue, and a lot of ads run about the different, with Hunter Biden taking money from the bank in China, and Trump really battling China. And really, in my mind, I can't think of another president who's even, attempted to step up and block China on anything. That I think a lot of those issues were to Trump's benefit. The unrest over the summer and even into the fall, and the Black Lives Matter and some of the what looked like China in the Cultural Revolution. You're dining someplace and someone's going to threaten you that if you don't raise your fist and say Black Lives Matter, that who knows what will happen. And people, it took the Democrats to have a couple pollsters tell them that this is not really working very well, and they figured it out in time to adjust a little bit. But after the election, of course, a lot of Democrats, as we talked about at Common Sense, really were upset at the left. But the truth is they shouldn't be so upset. They went along with all of it, and the fact that they didn't have a sense until the end that, oh, gee, maybe we shouldn't be in favor of looting. Looting just, no matter what problems there are, looting just is an ugly thing to witness. And, the day that Americans see looting and think, geez, this is wonderful, what a great political statement, we will be lost on that day.
From what I could tell of my friends, they just simply denied it was a very big problem, that it was just a few looting episodes. That was the whole thing the whole summer, is that there are no riots, there is no looting, there are no fires. It's just, it's just a few attacks on federal buildings. Why are you so worked up about it? I got this a lot from my leftist friends in this area.
Yes. Yeah, no, I heard some of that exact same thing that it's, why are you even bringing that up? It's so small. Well, if it's so small, then, quantify it as so small. The Portland thing, I thought one of the funny things was it was really all caused by Donald. Do you remember when it kind of became public that he had people there? The argument was it was all petering out and there was no real problem until Trump sent these federal agents and so on. Then, of course, he reaches an agreement, pulls federal people out, and all hell breaks loose. So the trouble with some of the spin and the messaging, even having the media there to help with that spin and on your side, in fact, maybe leading the charge oftentimes for the Democrats, is that people are apt to believe what they see with their eyes over what you tell them. And, all the funny memes. And of course, sometimes it wasn't just a funny meme. It was literally what was happening on our television sets where some reporter is saying, these have been largely peaceful protests where there's fires raging behind them. And the truth is, even vandalism, that was one of the things that was talked about a lot, that the property destruction, well, what happened to George Floyd was a lot worse than property destruction. Well, George Floyd was killed. So could I go next door and chop somebody's leg off and go, oh, well, but it's not as bad as, killing someone. This somehow that it's okay to smash the windows of some business that, of course, no one's argued that business did anything. The only way you can justify any of that is if you are in favor of a revolution to destroy every building in America and turn it to rubble, that is the best approach, that this system is so sick it needs to be overthrown and demolished in every way, shape, and form. Every business should be burned to the ground because it's unfair and terrible. And we need to go back to a state of nature. I think Hobbes is going to be more right than people think. And that's at the base of all the communism, socialism, which is kind of the same thing. All the base of that philosophy is about how we split up the loot, how we take abundance and make sure that everyone gets their fair share. It's nothing about creating abundance. And that's what capitalism and free markets, because freedom creates incentives. If people are free, they can work for themselves. And when they work for themselves, they create a lot more. And you know what? Sometimes we can't spend all the money. And I work at a business, a nonprofits, where unless people give us money, they're not buying products. They like what we're doing and they're donating money to it. Well, people don't donate money if they don't have any excess cash around. And when you think about it, now other people might say, well, I have a different business. We sell widgets or whatever. But if people don't have money, they're not gonna do that. And if you're in a high-tech business and a new startup, well, how do you think startups happen? Somebody had made a bunch of money and now they want to invest it. And that's how you're getting your job. And so this is, Paul Tsongas, a long time ago, he ran against Bill Clinton in 1992 in the Democratic primaries. He had cancer and so on. And he wasn't, he's from Massachusetts and he wasn't, he didn't have Bill Clinton's gift for gab. He also lacked some of the other things Bill Clinton had, thank goodness. But Tsongas said, you cannot be anti-business and pro-labor. And you can't believe that we should, with this abundance that has been produced, that we should be able to feed everybody. Well, that's new. That's new in the world, and it's been created by capitalism. And if you hate capitalism, then you want to live in a world in which that excess profit, that abundance doesn't exist. And that's, they're talking about the fear of starvation and hunger and just, not having food in the grocery store that can feed all of our people because of shutdowns and this pandemic. And, think about it. If this country is facing that, how many people are going to starve in the Horn of Africa? How many people are going to be starving in Bangladesh? It's the abundance created by capitalism, and free markets that ought to be given some appreciation, some thanks. And it's not as if it can't go away. It's a lot easier to spend money than to make money. And if you don't think that politicians can blow everything that hardworking businessmen and women have created, they can blow it fast. And so if you think, oh, well, now we've reached this level and it's just automatic that the money keeps flowing in, I beg to differ.
Yeah, you've reached a real crucial thing about the ideological debates. I think people just assume that what we have is what we'll always have simply because we have it.
Yes.
Right. And the political and the redistribution have no real effect on that. That is actually kind of the general theory of the left, that we can redistribute everything we want and it won't affect the production of future goods.
Yes.
To me, it's palpably not true.
Well, it's kind of pretending that it's great that you've had success, Tim. That's our success. We're going to take whatever we want from you. It's utopian in the thinking. And I remember back, I'm old enough that, and you are too, thank goodness, misery loves company. But I remember back after we put a man on the moon, the saying, if we can put a man on the moon, we can end poverty, wipe out all diseases, and of course, it's just not true. We can't wipe out all diseases magically just because we sent a man to the moon. And what it was, though, is people saying, well, if our society can do all this, now somehow we, even as voters, and of course, we all recognize there's never been a society in which voters have had enough control that they actually were voting to make all these decisions. Someone's going to be making those decisions for us. But if somehow we think that we can have the same thing that was developed by other folks on their own by just commanding it, just taking it over, it's like the countries that go communist and nationalize the industries. Venezuela has an oil industry that they've nationalized. It's not really that Venezuela's not doing so well. And this has happened again and again. They nationalize companies, but they don't get the same that they would have gotten had they let those companies be free and taxed them. So it is basically a utopian attitude, communism, socialism, and with kind of no appreciation for how we got to where we are. And like you say, with the idea that we're just always going to be there, the money's always going to flow in. And look at these lockdowns where, well, they should just pay everybody. And we'll just, maybe for 6 months or a year or 2 years, every business in America just gets a check. Every person gets a check, and no one has to do anything. I mean, that's, how do the checks get sent out? How does the food get delivered? How does
Yeah, and there is no stuff if you're not making stuff.
Yes.
So at some point, stocks right. And the nice thing about this last year and the lockdowns is that they have let sectors of the economy work.
Yes.
Though it's interesting how they chose some groups to attack and some groups to let go. Walmart and Costco and Home Depot locally are doing great.
Yes.
But there are a lot of little businesses that have just gone down because of these things. So it's interesting how the big businesses were given the go-ahead to be open, and little businesses were basically shut down.
Yes. Yeah. And to me, someone losing their business, I would think almost anybody, you don't have to be in business to have a sense of how much work someone's putting into their business. It'd be like if someone wrote a great novel and then someone else stole it and published it, and then they didn't get anything. There's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that go into a business, regardless of what the business is or anything someone does. And to see it just smashed, it's heartbreaking. And it also changes the nature of our society. I'm not anti big corporation because big corporations sometimes can produce goods that you buy. Okay, that's a good deal. But I have a little bit more trust in the smaller business. And I also want there to be a lot of competition and a lot of people who are in business. So there's not just, we don't want one or even two or even three choices in any particular thing from, cars to TVs to whatever. We want as many as we can get because we want the cheaper prices, we want the innovation, we want to be able to say, well, I like my coffee with a little bit of a shot of this and I get the best one over here. And oh no, I don't like it that way. I like this coffee. We want that competition. And we've gotten far afield of our scripts this week because we really didn't have a script that's exactly that. But we should talk about maybe the saddest Thanksgiving, because the one script we have done was about the North Korean and celebrating his success and the success of, anytime someone gets out of totalitarianism, gets out of a repressive government and gets to freedom. I mean, I feel like that helps me. And I think we all should feel that way because it does help us. It means there's one less slave, but being used by the slave countries, and which are really, it's not that many countries. It's a ton of people, but it's not that many countries, and that's great. On the day before Thanksgiving, we talked about suicide, and it's hard to think of anything sadder or more tragic. As a parent, and I've known friends who've had a child commit suicide, it's just the saddest thing. And, if you live long enough, you've experienced some depression, some sadness, some trauma, and I'm talking about emotional trauma, bad things that happen that are tough to get over. I'm not talking about breaking your leg or something. And so, stuff happens and it's devastating. And so the last thing in the world you want is more of that. We're always looking for ways that we can reach out to the person. And because sometimes when you're in that position, the last thing you want to do is go talk to someone. You tend to, when we get, and I know this in myself, and you see it in people all the time, when we have a problem where maybe we need that interaction the most is when we are most going to go by ourselves because we're not feeling it. We're not thinking, gee, I want to go see a friend. We're thinking, I want to get away from everybody because I feel terrible. And so we know that in this pandemic, it had been, suggested by a lot of different people, both, psychiatrists and people who are dealing with this issue and just average people who have us understanding of how important it is that we have connection with other people. And not just, as we say in the script, the saddest Thanksgiving, not just on our screens. Facebook is wonderful to communicate with people, and we're beginning to get on MeWe and other places. That's great. All of this, the ability to Skype call or Zoom call or what have you, that's wonderful. It's not the same thing as actually being personally with people, getting a hug, touching. I know in my past life, when I was a young person, I was on the run. I refused to register for the draft, was on the run for a year, however long, 2 years, I guess. And I was by myself most of that time. And there were times where you go months without a hug. That's not a healthy situation. And you start to kind of recognize, whoa, I need people. So what we have here is that Japan has been keeping statistics in a way that is a little bit more robust than the way the U.S. keeps statistics on suicide. and they have just gone through the roof with COVID-19, and they found it. Well, then I'll read you exactly what they say. The 2,153 suicides reported last month are about 600 more than the previous year. Think about that. 2,153 suicides reported last month are about 600 more than the previous year. Wow. And largest gains in women. I believe I'm correct that women actually attempt suicide more. Men are much more successful. But these are unfortunately unsuccessful or successful suicides. And so what this is saying is, wow, that was an 80% surge in suicide among women. This is something that we have to, it's easy to have a list. There's no, on your TV, if you're a TV watcher, especially if you're watching, Fox News or MSNBC or CNN, they always have the little in the corner, the coronavirus deaths in the world, in the country, and how many. They don't have the ticker on the suicides. But you can see in Japan, and maybe that's different than the U.S., but I think we all kind of understand this is the prerequisite for a huge increase in suicide. We've seen some increases, at least there's been some reports of increases in domestic violence. That's only to be expected. But again, so what's the solution? Well, people may still want to stay in their homes even if you don't lock them down, but let them be free. Let people decide that. And I think sometimes somebody who's feeling like they can't stay inside their four walls anymore might want to leave. And that's a good thing, not a bad thing. So anyway, this particular script, we don't have a solution to solve the suicide problem. But we're just pointing out lockdowns are antisocial. And the whole idea that, I just was together with people for Thanksgiving, and I thought, we were outside almost all the time and, didn't try to all stay in the same small space, talking for hour after hour. But certainly, there's some risk involved. And I'm coming to see my 86-year-old mother. And I was here in August because my sister, who's caring for her every day, and it's a decent amount of care that has to be provided every day. The other brothers and sisters, we've come in to give her a spell again and again. And I was very concerned then about, I sure don't want to come and bring, COVID to my mom, who's 86 and going to have a much higher risk factor. And being with her, it became very clear that if she got to choose, we would come see her, that the risk of her getting COVID and dying after 86 years of life was much preferable to being 86. And because she's 86, she can't be around her kids. She's not as mobile as she once was. She doesn't have all the same fun little things that she can do. It's a little bit frustrating to get older. You and me and you may have worn glasses longer, but I'm frustrated that I have to wear glasses and I can't see everything exactly as well as I could a few years ago. It's a little tougher when you're 86 and when you're not steady enough to be mobile. I mean, some people who are 86, they're walking around, and that's great. And it's great because they're going to have more fun and life's going to be more meaningful. But one of the ways my mom, and I think a lot of people who are her age, one of the ways that life continues to be worth living is to see your children and your grandchildren and your great grandchildren, and to be around people and to appreciate what you've been a part of. And so, in coming in August, I thought, I'm not going to question coming. I mean, obviously, if I'm really feeling sick and I have a sore throat and I have 107 fever, no, I'm not coming to visit. But if I'm healthy, as far as I know, I am not saying, oh, I'm going to wait for 3 months or 6 months or 9 months and not see my mom. My mom might not be there in 3 months and 6 months and 9 months. And by golly, I'm going for me, because I'm going to really, really appreciate that time. But I'm also going for her. And that's, it's just, we all take risks. It's like, here's another thing. We aren't talking so much about our scripts, but we're talking about good stuff. One of the things that kills me about this whole COVID thing is people being in the hospital and dying alone. And I'm not anybody who you got a decision to make, whether you go to the hospital or you don't go to the hospital, and what risk you take. I'm for 100%, 110% freedom, and you decide. And I understand hospitals are going to have certain rules and so on and so on. But I can tell you that if my wife is in the hospital with COVID, I am going to be there. And if I have to violate some rules, I'm going to find a way to get there. And if I knew that I have a 99.9% chance of catching COVID and dying from it, if my wife is in the hospital dying from it, I'm taking that chance. Because that's what I agreed to do. And I didn't agree because like someone twisted my arm. That's what I've wanted to do. That's who I am. That's who she is. That's what this is about. And if you think I'm crazy, well, then don't do it. And I'm crazy. But you know what? That's what makes me happy. That's what makes me feel like the type of person that I want to be. And being the type of person I want to be kind of makes me feel good. And so that's what I'm going to do. And I just think that we have kind of said, look, life is everything. And so we can't do anything that would take any risk with us dying. And I think that's BS. I don't think life is everything. I think living life as the person you want to be, as the person you are, that is more important than life itself. And we talk about, when it comes to war and peace, oftentimes that, or the John McCain thing, if nothing's bigger than yourself. And I don't like that so much because I'm a big individualist. I'm not sure any of these things are bigger than myself, or they don't have to be. But because it's not that my wife is more important than me. It's that what we have, it's that our love is more important than either one of us. And that's, everybody doesn't have to believe that, but we believe that, and acting on that. And in other things, it's why someone says, I'll volunteer to go to war. I mean, wouldn't a smart thing be to like hide somewhere? But no, because life itself is not worth everything. It's how you live. And it's why freedom's so important. I mean, the idea of someone living their whole life in shackles, and I'm not talking in a prison, I'm talking in a society that's a prison, in North Korea. I mean, would you risk your life to escape? Hell yes. And we have to do everything we can to, make it to where we don't have to risk ourselves, our lives, we don't have to go to war, we don't have to do all these things. But oftentimes, the way that you avoid all of that is to be willing to stand up and take some risks to, as Barney Fife says, nip it in the bud, to fight against clampdowns on free speech, not when the government has censored every, political organ in the country, but to go apoplectic when Facebook bans somebody, and not ban somebody just on your side, but even when they ban somebody on the other side, who's the most full of you know what person you've ever heard. That's the way you keep a society that's free, and avoid having to have unrest in the streets or a revolution or, sometimes people, when are we going to use our Second Amendment rights? Hopefully never. That's why we have Second Amendment rights. Why do we have free speech? So that we can use it and not have to use our Second Amendment rights. Anyway, there's my latest rant.
You almost hate to go on to something mundane after that. But you did have 3 other pieces this week.
Well, and I just popped on one of them, Disparate Outcomes, Desperate Logic, which is another thing that you could say, well, this isn't the biggest threat in the whole world, but it's a huge threat. And the threat is making everything about race, which is a way to say using anti-racism as your motivation to be a complete racist. I'm against racism, so I want race to mean everything. I want to make every decision on race. And here's what we're talking about. In Loudoun County, Virginia, it's Virginia County, very close to mine in Prince William. It's in the greater Washington, D.C. area, and a very wealthy county, and probably more higher percentage white students than in Prince William County or Fairfax or some of the closer in counties to Washington. But still a decent number of minorities. Even the non-minority Asians are there. Asians don't get to count as a minority because they do well. Well, interestingly enough, that's what this is about. They have a special high school that is a magnet STEM school. And they have these in New York City, different places where around the country where you have to get in, you have to pass a test and maybe a couple different exams. And they're trying to find out, hey, we have a certain number of slots. This is advanced stuff. So you have to show that you're capable of doing the work and so on. But it's for people who have scored high on tests and do the work and can make it. And they also, they have letters of recommendation and different things. And so you can always look at how are you deciding who gets to get in. And no doubt there's some things that could be fixed or done better or what have you. But what I would like to avoid are 2 things. One, making it all about, we're going to just have this many people who have, one ear bigger than the other ear, or this many for people who wear glasses, or this many slots for people who have this skin color, or this many slots for people who have this skin color, or this many slots for people who came from this part of the world, and this many slots from people whose ancestors were from this part of the world. That seems to me to be crazy. And the other thing that seems to be crazy is to have a school designed to help the top students and then deciding to dumb down the entrance exam or to make it somehow random or by lottery, anything but by merit. And if you find that the merit-based system they have is not effective in actually finding merit, well, then let's change it. Then you've got an argument. But their argument there is not about that. It is, let's not have 2 tests. Let's have one that's easier. There was a prerequisite that you have already gotten through geometry. They want to change that to where, and this is a STEM, science, technology, and what is it? What is the E? What's the E for in STEM?
Is it engineering?
Engineering, you're right, and math, and all the subjects I don't like. But although I was always scored better in those subjects, but I didn't like them as much. But anyway, all of those type prerequisites make sense in terms of you're trying to get the top students, but that's not what there was a complaint filed, and the Attorney General's office looked into it. And of course, the headline said, Virginia's AG's office finds elite Loudoun STEM school discriminates against Black, Hispanic students, Black, comma, Hispanic students. That's not at all what the AG found. The AG found there is reason to believe that there is discrimination because there are disparate outcomes. That's like saying, if there are more black ball players than white ball players on a given sports team, that the coach must be racist. It couldn't be that the black players were better in this particular case than the white players, or in another case that the white players or the Asian players were better than this player or that player. It has to be racism. It has to be discrimination. And so they have instructed Loudoun County schools, which public schools are more than happy to do, to work with the NAACP to come up with a new program. But the interesting thing about that is the only solutions they seem to be coming up with is to dumb it down. They did have one thing that I thought might make some sense, which was take away the letters of reference, which seem to me to create a much more subjective type thing where, oh, so-and-so raved about Johnny, so Johnny gets in instead of Susie because she didn't know as many people who wrote a really nice raving letter about you. So I'm absolutely copacetic with that sort of thing. And it sounds like maybe that is a good change. But don't dumb down all the tests and the classes you have to have as a prerequisite. The other interesting thing about it is that it turns out that the biggest problem is that not as many Black and Hispanic students apply. Now, this has been suggested to also be racism because somehow they're not telling them, they're not informing them, they're not encouraging them. They didn't leave enough breadcrumbs for them to find the place to sign up. And hey, if they were saying we're going to fix this by sending a letter to every parent or no, they're talking that somehow there needs to be more mentoring going on. It's as if it's all the teacher's fault that they didn't get more Black and Hispanic students to sign up. Interestingly enough, of the different, there were 65 Hispanic students that signed up. There were 80 Blacks, or maybe it was reversed there. There were 500 something white students. There were 1,400 Asian students who applied, who were part of the applicant pool. And so it wasn't now Asian students did get in. I think it was 13%, something along those lines. 13% of them got in that applied. 15% of the white students got in who applied. And it was only 9 and 7%, something along those lines for Black students and Hispanic students. But of course, those aren't huge differences in the percentages. The problem is largely Black and Hispanic students not applying and having the prerequisites and the skills to get there, but mainly not applying. So what this, and I think I'm going to do a commentary in the coming days, maybe next week, sometime soon, because as soon as I start to say then something else comes up. But what is going on here with Asians? What's up with Asians? Why are they, is it that the teachers in these schools just like Asians better than anybody else? Are they just spending all their time working with them and not working with the others? Why are they all, not all, but that's the way it feels. It feels like all of them they're dominating all these different things. Well, what is going on? And the only thing that comes to mind that really seems to be a stark difference is that Asian families tend to be much more intact than not just Hispanic and black families, but also white families. People don't realize. They look at the percentage of black kids in single family homes, and they don't realize that the percentage of white kids in single family homes has gone up faster than the percentage of black kids. Now, they were ahead when the stats seem to begin in like 1965, or at least what I've read. And that, but so this is not just a problem that, boy, it's really tough if a black kid doesn't have a dad, because it's almost always that they've got the mom and not the dad. Not always, but that's most of the time. It's a problem if any kid doesn't have a dad or doesn't have a mom. This is a big problem. And when all kinds of, when it's a huge percentage, 25 or 75, it's 25, I believe, of white kids now. It's 75 for black kids, and it's somewhere in between for Hispanic. I don't know what the number is. That's a huge issue. And I don't know what the number is among Asians, but that it's much lower. And that makes a difference. There was a little short I read in the paper. It's got to be 30 years ago now. But it was when my kids were younger. And they asked parents of kids who had scored up, were on the honor society and that sort of thing, what enabled your kid to succeed? And overwhelmingly, the answer among white parents was they're talented. And overwhelmingly, the answer among Asian parents was they worked hard. And when you think of this world and how many talented people are unsuccessful, how much wasted time, even successful people, I feel like I'm not completely unsuccessful, but boy, and we all have this, boy, I wish I would have applied myself more back in high school on this subject. Or, I got out of high school, I never took any band. I kind of thought the band wasn't cool enough. So I never learned anything about music. I love music. I wish I would have spent more time, learning about that when I was younger and had the time. We grew up without, I never learned a second language. These sorts of things are, we all wish that we would use our talents more effectively. And so if, the parent who, hey, don't worry about it, you're talented, I don't think that's going to work as well as the parent who says, you better work hard, because that's the key to success. Because I'm convinced working hard is the key to success. Anyway, and I think that these are cultural differences. And by golly, I think the rest of us ought to say, how much of that Asian culture do we want to figure out and implement in our own lives? That's what you always want to do. If someone, if you're playing tennis with somebody and they're whooping you, you want to start figuring out what they're doing. Because how humans usually learn? We see someone else do it and we copy it. It's not dumb, it's smart. Because sometimes you can copy it and you end up doing it better than the person you copied it from. So anyway, it's unbelievable that there's no discussion in our country to try to figure out what is it that Asians are doing, Asian students, that allows them to just beat the pants off of everybody else. And are we not interested? We're trying to close these gaps. Wouldn't you want to know what the people at the top are doing? But that's not what anybody's talking about. And that tells you a lot.
I didn't notice any discussion in that case of male and female.
No, there was no.
Which interests me because in the old days when I was young, there was a magnet school in Portland called Benson. I think it still exists, actually. And it was overwhelmingly male at that time. Because it's been shown pretty conclusively that men, when they're given the choice, prefer thing-oriented subjects, and women tend to prefer people-oriented subjects. Now, you and I are a little bit oddball on this because, like you said, you were good at math and so forth, but you moved to a more people oriented occupation, and some, history, for instance, is a good example of a more people oriented field. In third world countries, the egalitarianism of occupations is pretty high, but in a first world country dedicated to sexual equality, Sweden, the disparate outcomes and life choices between men and women are more striking. That is, women really do sort themselves, and that is sorting themselves into people-oriented fields, medicine, psychiatry, teaching, and men go off and do things that don't require as many people or about things more, right? Physics, engineering, that sort of thing. This just happens.
Right. And we're not talking about all women or all men. It's just the propensity of the gender or the sex.
And the idea that this wouldn't also apply to race, to me, is preposterous.
Oh, I don't know.
And Thomas Sowell is the big one on this. He showed over and over again, we have all this information that ethnicities have propensities that we can't even explain. We don't even understand. Like in World War II, almost all the major generals on both sides of the European theater were German descent. Was there a pro-German discrimination at West Point? Were there anti-German? Were Germans discriminating against non-Germans in military? Almost certain.
They did in Germany. I know that they really would not allow anyone but a German to be the head of the German army.
But not in America. And it's just not likely. But there was Eisenhower, and there was all these major figures who were of German descent, and they beat the Germans in Germany. And
of course, people sometimes don't realize though that the largest, and I don't know if it's still true, but at one point, during World War II, the largest ethnic group in America was German descent.
It's still true.
Different descent. There were more people of German descent than Anglo-Saxon, English descent or Irish descent.
Right.
But I do think that gender is a bigger, male-female is a bigger difference, I think, and I haven't studied it, but just off the cuff, I would expect to be a bigger difference than ethnicity. Mostly. Just because people are treated so differently, I think, along those lines. And maybe that's less so, but it's, and some of that is people tend to believe, well, it's just that you handed, Billy a fire truck and you handed Susie a doll. And it just is, it's funny. You hand Susie the fire truck and the fire truck is meeting up with some other fire trucks to talk about something. And you hand the boy the doll and that doll is diving through glass to get to someplace to fight somebody it's, and I'm sure some of that is socialization too, but it's funny that, again, what do you do about this? Well, you could create a massive state and then have all kinds of experts decide every issue of race and ethnicity and sex and everything else and set society according to their grand scheme. Or we could just let people be free, not violate each other's rights. That's why we have police and courts, and people will sort themselves out.
Yeah, no, that's obviously the case. I don't see why we would worry about it. I mean, remember when we were young, racism and sexism developed a philosophical perspective. I mean, racism first was sort of the idea that you hate somebody because of a race. That's what the original definition was. That's the only reason you're hating somebody is because it's another race. It turned out that the more philosophical idea was that we make too much of race in determining the value or the worth of somebody, right?
Right.
Is that we make too much of race in making all these decisions. But there is something to race. I mean, these races and these sexes are different, and we shouldn't worry about those differences. And in fact, to worry about the differences that are inherent in somebody's biological natures or their baseline natures, we shouldn't worry about it. We should just let them be what they are.
Right.
And then if they want to be something, if they want to try to be something different, if a person who's bad at math wants to become Einstein, we can let them try. I think it's just bad advice.
Right. But people have a tendency. People have a tendency. Sometimes they have to bump their head a few extra times. I'm kind of one of, I'm one of those people that you can tell me, but usually I have to kind of bump into the wall a little bit before I move the right direction, and that's going to happen. And then of course you're going to have the person who couldn't quite sing and really couldn't be a singer. You're not a singer. Get out of here. But just kept coming back and back and back. And then they find out, well, he doesn't sing so well, but boy, those are some good songs you've written. And I'm thinking, not that this is the story of Bob Dylan, because it's not, but you end up being someone like a Bob Dylan who writes a zillion songs because you so loved music and you're so into it, and you don't quite become what you wanted to become, but you still become something great. And you wouldn't have become that great thing except you took all the people's back of their hands and get out of here, you're not any good, and you had the perseverance. So again, that's why freedom, because some people have enough perseverance, they may jump over that 9-foot wall with barbed wire on it.
Okay, well, that's carrying it back around, so that's nice. We've touched that back. We're probably done with that subject, though. Now I got to ask you, because I hold that awful opinion that Bob Dylan can't really sing with beans. I don't like his voice. I understand why he's popular, because the songs are great and he does have a sort of character.
Yes,
but
yes, a lot
I
of
would never go to Bob Dylan to sing anything I write.
No, you would never. He's only he actually, as I understand it, is a good singer in knowing how, what notes to hit and and knowing how singing works. He just has not a great voice. But there's certain Bob Dylan songs you wouldn't want someone else to sing. And then there's certain ones that, if Peter, Paul and Mary or the Byrds do it, you're kind of happy that they did it.
I like Peter, Paul and Mary singing one or two of his hits. They did a really good job. They made him even bigger, I think, right?
Yeah, I think "Blowing in the Wind" was probably most people, until more recent times, had heard it on the radio. It was Peter, Paul, and Mary doing it, not Bob Dylan. But it is that sort of thing that certain people, they're going to stop and they're going to go do something else. But some people, they just, if that's what moves them, then they have enough perseverance. It's amazing how often they end up being successful.
We're on a subject right now about, personal growth and the like, that does deal with today's script, because the focus of today's script is the reaction to Jordan Peterson's next book, right? And
right.
Jordan Peterson is all about this. That's his main subject. He's a clinical psychologist, and he's written about how people could live better lives and so forth. But that's not really what the script is about. It's called Cry No More, and it's for the 27th.
And of course, it's great because anytime I can slip a song into a link to a YouTube song or whatever, I like to do it. And the Stones do You Can't Always Get What You Want, which is actually a quite interesting song after the election, as we point out, not only because there's a lot of us who didn't get what we wanted, and those of us who are more libertarian, we could sing this song almost every election.
I never get what I want.
But here, of course, it's an interesting song because it was a big song at Trump rallies and stuff. They were always playing it, which was kind of interesting.
I never understood it. I thought it was the weirdest thing. It's a drug song. It's basically about hooking up with a druggie girl, right?
Yeah, but it's become, I think it's become more the line, you can't always get what you want. But if you try, sometimes you get what you need, in a more philosophic way or something. Yeah. Nobody's thinking of, my favorite Monkey Man is about somebody who's a heroin addict, but my favorite line is that he always has an unmade bed, because it made me feel better as a teenager when, my mom got on to me that, well, hey, it's kind of cool. They're even singing songs about not making your bed. I wasn't thinking of, gee, I'm halfway to being a heroin addict because I didn't make my bed. But here, I think the key element is that, you can agree with Jordan Peterson, you can disagree with him, but the fact that he has become, in some people's eyes, because we're talking about, and what was the publishing house? Penguin, that decided they're going to publish his book. I mean, he's somebody who sells books. They're going to publish his book, and there were a lot of young people at Penguin who were livid that they were publishing him. And, in a free society, it seems to me you shouldn't be very surprised that unless you own the publishing house, that you're working for some place that's going to publish some things that you don't particularly like. And this idea that, we only let people speak or communicate who we agree with everything they say, there's going to be a lot of silence. But it also is this idea that we can not just that, hey, okay, it's understandable you don't like, somebody. Oh, you're disappointed that your publishing house is publishing their book. But the idea that you can just label someone a white supremacist or transphobic or whatever without any real evidence whatsoever. I mean, it was, someone who says, hey, I don't know if it's such a great idea. And this is, in fact, last week when we had the commentary about Bill Maher and him giving a hard time to people on the far left who were way over the top. One of the things he mentioned was this, that the idea, this idea that, every toddler who you think for a second might be the other gender should go through some surgery, and not just, but some 6-year-old or 8-year-old or, even in puberty. It seems to me like these are questions that people should be discussing, and we should be thinking about, what makes sense. And we shouldn't have this idea that whatever someone says, if someone wants to change someone else's gender at 2 days, who are we to say anything about it? Well, unless you believe parental rights include the right to, mutilate your kid, because someone could certainly argue that is, it's, these, and the truth is, maybe these people are all transphobic. Maybe at the end of the day, we all hear all the arguments on every side of it, and that's what we decide. Let's hear the arguments. Let's stop walking on eggshells, and let's stop throwing eggshells on the floor and telling people to walk on them, because this idea that there's just certain things you should never say and that you can't talk about anything. One of my favorites is the word Oriental. We have Oriental medicine. I read an op-ed by a woman who practices Oriental medicine and who says she is Oriental. And there are often times where it seems to me that you're trying to talk to the people you're trying to talk about the people who live in China and Japan and Korea, and not the people who live in, Afghanistan or India. Well, all of those people are Asian. So if the only word you can use is Asian, you couldn't say Oriental. It seems like we need a new word to be able to talk about people who are from the Orient. But you'll constantly be told Oriental is a racist word, as if it was a slur against people from the Orient. And maybe some people did say, hey, there's an Oriental. I hate them because they look different than me. I hate them because they've got all the top slots at the best schools because they actually study. But anyway, and so maybe someone used it that way, but it's just, there's nothing about the word that is racist in any way that I can figure out in reality. But at the same time, if you use it, everyone goes berserk because we don't live in reality. We live in this pretend world. So there's a lot of these types of things, and we need to knock them down one after the other and stop playing into them. And so maybe I should use the word Oriental as much as I have any reason to use it. And in other things, that if you have an opinion about how people should deal with kids who they're not sure about their gender sense and so on, maybe you should say it instead of not say it. And maybe if you hear it and you think, wow, that's a wacky opinion, maybe you ought to just gently offer your own. And maybe in that discussion, something good would happen instead of calling that person a white supremacist or a transphobe and never engaging with what they're really thinking and actually believe. So anyway, this is also just a huge free speech thing. The idea that certain books need to be burned, that certain people need to be banished, these are not core American beliefs. These are foreign to the entire history of America. And maybe last, I guess we should just talk a little bit about good relations with genocide. And I have a question mark at the end of that, because I'm kind of questioning, does it really make sense to have like good relationships with countries who are practicing genocide? I mean, should we have kind of tried to buddy up to Hitler and the Nazis a little bit more? Should we have traded with them more and tried to get them to see our way, or just worked with them? Maybe if there was still the Nazis had won World War II and controlled Europe, we might need to deal with them now on climate change. I mean, come on, climate change. A lot of people believe it's an existential threat. It could be. We don't ever know what's going to happen tomorrow in the weather, or in 100 years or 10 or whatever. So would we, if Hitler and the Nazis controlled Europe, should we kind of realize, hey, we got to deal with them. We need their help on climate change. Or would we have a different attitude? And the reason I say this is because there was a great op-ed written by Josh Rogin in the Washington Post. And how often do I come on this podcast and say there was a great op-ed in the Washington Post or anything great in the Washington Post? But this was a very good op-ed because it recognized what we're not hearing, which is there's a lot of pressure among corporate America to let's get back to a smooth relationship with Xi Jinping and the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party that controls China. And there's a lot of money to be made if you can get access to that 1.5 billion people. We have a lot of trade and all kinds of businesses that are in China, our supply chains include all kinds of things happening in China. And of course, in the last year or so, there's been a massive move, not just by the United States. There are a lot of people who want to act like, oh, just Trump decided to start this big fight with China, and this is just about that. Well, Australia is in a huge fight with China right now. China is embargoing all kinds of things. And one of the things that they have said to folks in Australia is, if you want good relations, there's a few things you need to do. And Rogan says them, and I'll just quote him. Australia must stop exposing Chinese Communist Party influence efforts on its soil. See, they're finding that the Chinese are basically bribing, putting professors on the payroll at different colleges, different researchers, and people are being worked on by China. The same thing's happening in the United States. Every couple of weeks, there's some new professor who didn't quite tell the feds like he was supposed to that he's getting 4.5 million from the Chinese. They are pretty good at soft power, especially the bribery side of soft power, and they're using it very effectively. Let me go on. So they must stop exposing Chinese Communist Party influence efforts on its soil, shut up about Taiwan, Hong Kong, and the Uyghurs. And shut up is really something the CCP's big on. They want everyone to shut up about all the genocide that they're carrying on. There is a genocide going on right now. It's the only difference between what Hitler did with the Jews and what the Chinese are doing with the Uyghurs is that we don't know that they have ovens and are massacring people in mass. They are, however, browbeating and beating people, preventing them from practicing their religion, sterilizing them against their will. These are all considered, any one of those things would be considered genocide, because genocide is trying to destroy a whole people. And you can kill them all. Yeah, that's one way to destroy them, but there are other ways to destroy them as a people. And that is what China is doing. And it seems to me that we have to react to that. And of course, what they're also doing is turning the free people of Hong Kong, who were supposed to be free for another 27 years in the stupid agreement with Britain, into slaves right now with their national security law that says they can't say anything against the government. And what do they want next? Next, they want to go take Taiwan, which they claim. Well, they claim a lot of stuff. And I've had people tell me, well, China's never aggressed against its neighbors. Well, tell that to the dead Indians on the border in the Himalayas. Tell that to Tibet. Well, oh yeah, well, they haven't attacked Tibet. They've taken it completely over and enslaved the populace. And there's still resistance to their rule. And they've had many of the same efforts to wipe out religious practice. This is insidious, and this is something that everybody on any decent political spectrum should oppose. And the whole point that Josh Rogin is trying to make is, do not, Mr. Biden, try to get smooth relations with the Chinese. If you want to build, which is what I'm hoping Biden will do, and it's the one place that you could see somebody might do a little bit better job than Trump in terms of getting Japan and South Korea and Taiwan and Australia on the same page to say, and Vietnam and Malaysia and Indonesia, where all of them, and the Philippines, where China is aggressing and trying to take islands that are theirs, waters that are theirs. So there is, I think, an opportunity to build a real alliance against, encroachment and tyranny and attacks, including military invasions, to stop China from doing that and prevent that and hold them a little bit better in check. And maybe Biden will do that. Let's hope, because if he doesn't, if he goes back to business as usual, I think we're going to see war, and I think we're going to see a pretty serious war. And if we don't see a serious war, we're going to see an Asia that is completely controlled by the Chinese. And I worry that we are in the beginnings of a World War III, in the same way that, before Pearl Harbor, before the Germans invaded Poland, World War II had already begun. And I sometimes compare an attack by China against Taiwan, or the West kind of saying, okay, well, we won't fight you over Taiwan, to the West saying before World War II, well, Chamberlain flies to Munich and or Berlin. Was it Munich or Berlin? Somehow I think it was Munich. But anyway, he flies. He meets with Hitler. He gets an agreement. We have peace in our time. And by the way, Germany gets to take over the Sudetenland. That didn't stop Germany. And I'm convinced that handing over arguably the freest country in Asia, the only country in Asia that has gay marriage, that allows same-sex marriage, the only country in Asia that has a vibrant initiative and referendum process so the people have direct democratic checks on their government, a country with term limits on their president. And they've developed from Chiang Kai-shek's fascist dictatorship into this wonderful country, somehow giving that 24 million people, basically roughly the same size population as Australia, to a communist totalitarian fate, more totalitarian than communist. But that is it's just so horrific a thought. And the truth is, what does history suggest? I think it suggests that the Chinese Communist Party doesn't stop there. In fact, they don't seem to have any stop anywhere unless someone is stopping them. So I think it's really critical. One of the main reasons that I preferred a Donald Trump victory to a Joe Biden victory, other than just how terrible Biden is on everything, was that Trump had stood up to the Chinese for whatever reason, whatever motivations you believe it was. I just don't think there's any question that no other president in my lifetime has stood up to the Chinese, and Trump did. And I'm so afraid, especially with the track record in the Obama administration and with his son Hunter, that Biden would be terrible on China and that we would just go back to pretending that they're just like us, just a different system, no big deal, nothing to see here. Let's trade and make money. Oops, they control our universities. They bought off this person. They've stolen all this intellectual property. Oh, who cares? There's still lots of money to be made. That scares me. And I'm actually have become a little bit more hopeful with some of the things that people close to the Biden administration have said, and some of the media starting to push, like this op-ed by Rogan, starting to push him on this, that we need to be eyes wide open about what the Chinazis are all about. And so I was glad to see this piece in the Post, and I think we have to, I don't have all the answers on how we should, what the government should do precisely in every case. If we recognize that China is equivalent to a Nazi society and practices genocide right now, today it is happening, I'm convinced the choices for what we do are going to be different than if we have a media, which has gotten millions. Washington Post, Wall Street Journal have split about $10 million from the communist Chinese in the last 4 or 5 years in ad dollars that have been spent with those publications. But I mean, if we go back to, hey, China is just another country like any other, a little different system, but hey, what the heck? Well, then the choices are going to be, hey, why would we want to fight these people? They're claiming Taiwan. Who are we to say anything? Let's just let them do it, because then we're going to have an easier time trading, and our big businesses, our big corporations can make a bunch of money. I want the trade. I love trade, but we have to recognize who they are. And if we do, I'm convinced our choices and our decision-making is going to have to be a heck of a lot better than if we don't.
On that happy note, is that a happy note? Is that a happy note? We probably should end.
Yes, we should. And if we thought about whether it was actually a happy note or not, we'd go on and on. Thank you very much, sir.
This podcast can be found at BitChute and YouTube and SoundCloud, but just go to thisiscommonsense.org. You'll see everything you need, including Paul Jacob writing 5 days a week about the big issues of the day.